Here, let me, okay, yeah, cool, we're recording here and there, and there.
1 minute until showtime.
I think. Let's see, I got a couple more things I got to check on here, and, where is it? Okay, it's, yeah, we're working on that, and that's recording. Alright, we're all hooked up, and, theme music will be coming up here. My guest is Gary Hunt today. I'll introduce you properly when the recording starts. And what about Mike? Speaking of no-shows, how the hell can I promote?
Your show will go live in 5 seconds.
Okay, never mind.
4, 3, 2.
Don't even know if I want to talk about him.
Blog Talk Radio.
He took an oath to defend the Constitution of the United States of America. By some, he's been called controversial.
I'll keep my freedom, I'll keep my guns, try to keep my money and my religion too.
Now, keep in mind that some of my guests have been approached by Homeland Security or FBI saying, why are you going on the Clay Douglas show?
My message to those guys, if they're listening this morning, is go get a cup of coffee. Maybe you'll learn something.
We both took the same oath, to defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. I don't recall there being an expiration date on that.
I'm going to keep my big BA, keep my friends the same, keep the government out of my business, and y'all can keep the change.
He is the free American, Clay Douglas.
We know what we need, we know who to blame.
Catch the Free American Hour, weekdays at 7 a.m. Pacific, 10 a.m. Eastern.
And it's about that time right now. Do intro. Hope you like it. Hope you enjoyed it. I kind of got a smile out of it. My guest today is Gary Hunt. Hello, Gary. How are you?
Just fine, Clay. How are you?
Well, I'm doing all right. Still alive. They hadn't managed to kill me yet, but I'm a little curious. You know, you've been on. We talked about the committees of safety, and I kind of got behind that. I promoted it a bit, and then the man that's been appointed the head of that, Mike Fry, missed 3 shows, skipped 3 shows. It was a no-show. You've been doing a lot of radio for a long time. Almost, I think you may have been doing radio longer than me.
Well, my radio started in 1993. I did close to 100 shows from Waco during the siege and did numerous shows after Waco. It died off after 95, but for the most part it was a busy period. And in that whole time I've never been a no-show. Now, when last I spoke to Mike was after he missed the first show. He had the flu, and he may still have the flu, but you know, I can't say why he's not responding to emails and calls unless he's in pretty bad health.
Well, you know, part of this is you don't know whether it's a failure to communicate or whether he's been in an accident and disappeared. He could be, we might not hear from him for another 3 months, like in my situation. I mean, nobody knew whether I was alive or dead.
Well, I had my own business for 15 years, and before that worked for 2 counties as county surveyor, and you know, I had a responsibility to my clients or my employer, and I could never give that responsibility down, and I still refuse to. I got a call the other day, for example. I still do survey work from time to time in orange groves, locating trees, replacing trees for replantings. And he called me the night before and said, we want to be ready tomorrow morning at 7:30 to survey. And I said, okay. And so he got there at about 10 to 8. And I said, where you been? And he said, well, I said, start setting up at 7:30. And I said, well, 7:30 is the start time for me. And so I was even ahead of him. And it's just, like I told him, if it was 4 o'clock in the morning, I'd be there. Of course, last time I was on your show, I was a wee bit late. But
well, again, it's just, it's confused, you know, and I've been kind of looking forward to talking to you about this whole Patriot thing. I mean, I got outraged at Waco. You were outraged at Waco. You tried to do something. You communicated with people. You went out and said, well, wait a minute, you killed 17 little children to save them from a child molester that had never been convicted, that didn't have any court. I mean, none of these people were charged with any kind of crimes. I mean, this was I thought it was a psychological operation on the American people just to see how much we'd put up with. And I was screaming at the TV, you know, where's the sheriff? Where's the state patrol? Where's the highway patrol? You know, why are they letting this happen? I heard the 911 calls. How could that happen? And why did it happen? And
well, the reason it happened wasn't to show American people. Actually, you know, it was supposed to be a very quiet operation. Nobody was supposed to know about it. They wanted a little press as an introduction, which is why they contacted a few local people and let them know that something was happening. But their intention was Showtime, and it was to get funding on March 10th for the BATF to put together basically a hit team. I think it was a 110-man hit team, and it went before Congress on the 10th, but it was turned down. But the idea, the name of the operation was Showtime, and what they wanted to do was show that they had to bring officers from all over the country. They had officers from Miami, Atlanta, Oklahoma City, Texas, all come together for this operation. They weren't all local, and what they wanted to do is get the funding to put together this team that could come together, could train together to do operations like Waco. Now, the interesting thing about it was, you know, if they wanted to go after illegal weapons, they could have gone to Los Angeles, where the gangs have automatic AK-47s. They use them almost daily. Instead, they figured it was safer to go to a church in Texas on Sunday morning with women and children around, because they thought there would be submission, but they would show that the force was necessary to get them to come out with their hands up. They were too cowardly to go to Los Angeles and go to a gang headquarters and seize those guns. And they knew they were automatic weapons there. It turned into a fiasco, and that's why eventually they settled on Bob Ricks, because the other guys were really blowing the press conferences. Their answers showed that it was a police state. I think you know that Louis Beam was down there, and one of the questions he asked when I was still allowed in the press conferences was, is what we're seeing here in Waco indicative of the coming police state? They never answered this question, but with some sign language, they had the Waco Police Department escort Louis Beam from the press conference at gunpoint.
Now, Louis Beam, just for our listeners here, because we may have some that are a little younger than us, Louis Beam is the Oh, how, God, we've been called all kinds of names, but he put out the document talking about leaderless resistance, and this is one of the people they're scared of now. They call me, a loner, and that was my nickname, by the way, for many, many years. The lone wolf, that's, and Louis Beam coined the whole phrase leaderless resistance.
He wrote an article about it, which is posted on my webpage. If you just do a search for Leaderless Resistance, Louis Beam. In fact, he's got a webpage up now, too, and he's got that on it. Now, Louis Beam has got more than that behind him. He was charged with sedition at one time by the federal government. He stood trial on sedition. He's the first person, I believe, that ever beat sedition charges brought by the U.S. government. And this is back in the 80s. I mean, Louis has been around a long time. He's a real nice guy. One day I came back to the motel room, and it was my motel room, but the Waco team, the guys that were working with me, had access to the room as well. But I came back to the room, and all these people are standing around talking to this one guy that I didn't know. And Dick Rivas was with me. He wrote a book about Waco. He was down there at the time. We walked in, and I didn't know who this guy was. I said, "Who's this guy?" And he was introduced to me as Louis Beam. And but Louis said, "I'm just a little guy." And I said, "Well, I'm just a little guy too." And we shook hands. And I liked the guy. I got to say, he was very friendly, very open, very knowledgeable, very, very intelligent. We had quite a conversation. I have a lot of respect for Louis Beam. And the idea of leaderless resistance was in my mind when I wrote the Plan for Restoration of Constitutional Government. It comes into play in parts 1 and parts 2 of the Plan for Restoration of Constitutional Government. And it has historical background. There were a lot of acts against the British prior to Lexington and Concord. Some of those acts were by organized or disorganized mobs, up to 26,000 people, with rifles telling judges to resign. But others were very covert acts. A small handful of people would go and grab a tax collector and tar and feather him and put him in a cart and hang a sign on him and parade him through town. Now, back then, nobody would turn against them. They would not get turned in. They could go in the guy's house, grab him, kidnap him, take him out, tar him and feather him, tote him down the street. There were a number of people that died from tarring and feathering. It's very dangerous. Removing the tar often removes the skin. It depends on how hot the tar was, I guess, when they put it on. But there were other acts. They stole cannon from a fort in, I think, in Maine, it is not, at the time. There were apparently a few assassinations along the line in South Carolina and some of the New England states. So there were covert acts by small groups of people. And so parts 1 and 2 of the plan kind of deal with those covert acts. Part 3 of the plan is where the committees of safety and the militia really come into play. But if you understand history, not that they teach in school, what happened back then is these acts of aggression, forcing judges at gunpoint to resign from the court, Worcester, Massachusetts, declaring independence from British rule in 1774, declaring independence in 1774. These acts were violations of the law, but they were carried out, and them being carried out was putting pressure on General Gage, who was in charge of Massachusetts at the time. And he couldn't suppress this activity. Of course, he didn't have cops on every corner, but he couldn't suppress this activity.
Well, let's not forget the cameras and the tracking chips, and we've come a long way, haven't we?
Right. So when I wrote the plan, I took into consideration the fact that we have a different playing field than the Founding Fathers had. Completely different playing field. We have to deal with the cameras that just permeate this country. But you can take advantage of things like that, because if you want to go north, what you do is you drive south and make sure the cameras see you, and then you go to a remote place and get some water-based paint, repaint your truck, put some fake license tags on, and stay away from the cameras, but then turn around and go north. they're going to believe you went south because they rely on their technology. Similarly, if you have a cell phone, have a couple of these ones that you know, the limited time ones. But if you're going east, put your cell phone on a big rig that's going west, and they're going to be tracking, and leave it on, and they're going to be tracking your cell phone, thinking you're going west when you're going east. Technology can be overridden. It can be actually used to deceive them because there's reliance on it. But that's the different playing field, and it's got to be addressed if we're going to do anything. Now, that forces us into a more covert position if we're going to take action that's going to piss off the government and cause them to do something stupid like April 19th, 1775. There's a book called Mullen Lobb. It's written by a guy that goes by the name, at least as author of the book, of Boston Tea Party. It's an excellent book. It talks about the Free States Project, and had it gone to Montana, a western state, rather than New Hampshire, a New England state. New Hampshire's too crowded, too expensive, and it was a big mistake. I was a member of the Free States Project, and I voted for a western state. I don't think it was Montana. It was a long time ago. But when they chose New Hampshire, I wasn't going to go to New England. I've been there before. I met my wife there. I went to the Indian reservation there. It's too crowded. You can't do anything. But had they gone to Montana, Mullen Lobb was written about, had it been in Montana, and how they would people Montana overcome the government by force of numbers in voting and get free state candidates in every state. And eventually they anticipated that the federal government was going to react to them taking over a state and saying, up yours, federal government. It also has a couple of very well thought out parts dealing with kidnap and or assassination of government political leaders. Now, these are the issues that they used in Mullen Lobb to force the hand of government to act. Now, once, just like on April 19th, 1775, there were people, I've got Lucy Hosmer's diary on the blog, for example, and it talks about how they didn't think they were going to go to war, but they finally did. Now, Nord Davis had also given me another diary, and I can't find it, and he's dead now, but this guy said, we will never fight the British. I could not consider taking arms against my fellow British subjects. April 19th, and April 19th, when he heard of that, he went down and enrolled in the militia. He became a very active participant in the siege of Boston. But one day he thought he'd never go to war, and the next day he realized he would. That's was proverbially called the SHTF, or shit hits the fan day.
Aren't we getting to that situation now? This last thing is bringing the military in. Now in the film that I did, True Face of FEMA, almost 10 years ago, I filmed first Homeland Security meeting after FEMA had been rolled into Homeland Security. We'd been warning about FEMA, what it was going to become for years. And, in case of a single outbreak of smallpox in a major metropolitan area, or a earthquake like on the New Madrid fault line, we'll need 400,000 well-armed, well-trained, organized, disciplined troops to control the American people. And, you don't think a lot about that. He's asked, are you talking about the National Guard? No, they're going to be in Afghanistan or Iraq or someplace else. No, and they're too expensive anyway. We need a cheap source of well-armed, well-trained, organized, disciplined troops. This latest law that has just been passed, I mean, how much of a reach is it to take Clay Douglas, who's been named as in an FBI document as a right-wing extremist? How much is to take that and move it into the category of belligerent combatant, because we're resisting this whole New World Order communist crap that we've been spoon-fed?
Well, have we looked realistically at how it's going to come down if they retain the initiative? Now, the plan is for us to take the initiative. And you've got military service, Clayton. You know that you have to take the initiative if you want to win. You can't be reacting to everything they do, because you're totally defensive at that point. But one article that I wrote, C3CM, which is on the blog, talks talks about, and it gave me a picture of what we're really going to see, that the government has categorized people, and so when they decide they're going to get Clay Douglas, they're going to decide they're going to get Gary Hunt, they're going to decide they're going to get Louis Beam, they're going to decide they're going to get all these people that in the article would be described as A1s. But what they're going to do is like a drug bust. You know, when you read about a drug bust where in Los Angeles at 8 o'clock in the morning, in New York at 11 o'clock, they went and raided these places. What they're going to do is they're going to identify the leadership of the Patriot community, those that are listened to, and then they're going to take 2 or 3 agents. They're going to get some local cops. They're going to tell them it's a drug bust or child pornography ring or some story, and the cops are going to follow them. Now, when the cops participate and find out it's not, it's too late. They've given up their integrity. They have already submitted to the federal government. They've violated their oath, but they've already taken that step. But they're going to hit at 8 o'clock here, 9 o'clock where you are, 10 o'clock in the Central Time Zone, and 11 in the Eastern Time Zone all at once, and they'll probably take out 60 to 80% of the Patriot leadership with no time to make phone calls because it's happening all over at the same time.
Now, I walked into the FBI office and dropped a bundle of magazines down that pointed the finger at Rabbi Dov Zakheim at 9/11. I dropped that a bundle on their desk, and they had listed me. This was in the Albuquerque office. They listed me in a guide to right-wing extremists. But they had just passed this. We're Senate Bill 1959 on the homegrown terrorist thing. I said, I just wanted you guys to know who I am. And I walked out of the office, so obviously they didn't have any charges against me. But and the governor called, made in New Mexico, Gary Johnson, recalled that document. But that law that they passed, you never heard anything about it in the mainstream media since then, but that formed the fusion centers, and the fusion centers are what the federal government is using to compromise and control the city cops. Is that accurate?
The fusion centers are part of a whole strategy. Now, let's go back to Waco, though. They deputized the Waco Police Department, the McLennan County Sheriff's Department, the Texas State Police, Texas Rangers. They were all deputized. Now, if they don't accept that presumption of authority by the federal government, they're no longer a cop. And these guys depend on feeding their family with what they've got. That's a tough obstacle for us to breach until they know that we can provide for their families. Now, when you read the plan, the provision to make sure that everybody's provided for is in there so that they can jump sides and come to our side. But it's just like, you remember Michael New, right?
Yes, and Daniel's always been a friend of mine. I'd like to talk to him again. Michael's had some problems when he came back.
Yeah, and they were caused by stress, by what he had to go through. But Michael New, for those that weren't around back then, was a homeschool boy. When I called his family, Daniel, first, and talked to Daniel, he said, all my children, they have a big family, but all my children are homeschooled. That was a pleasing thought to me, because this guy's learned to think. He hasn't been learned to have stuff jammed down his throat. And then I called Michael in Germany and spoke with him, and this is before he didn't step out. And I talked to him about what the other troops in the barracks were saying. Do they support you? And he says, there's not one that opposes what I'm doing, but they won't speak out. And he explained that some of them are career people. They have a career, and if they supported Michael New, who refused to wear United Nations blue and serve under a foreign commander, and that was the issue, they would lose their career. And the others were just in for one term, but they were relying on their paycheck to feed their families. They could not risk that, because one of the military punishments is extra duty without, you can have your pay suspended. So if you've got a family, all of a sudden there's no pay for your family. So of the 300 men in the company, Michael New was the only one with the courage to stand up and say, screw you to the government. And the others, those sympathetic, were going to continue their duties. And so I don't think that we can expect, at least initially, the support we want. In fact, if what I think will happen, which I just described, these local police will have given up their integrity when they go in on a drug bust, find there's no drugs, but see you and me shackled and carried away anyway. So the plan was really an answer to a question. The question was, can we have a revolution, successful revolution nowadays with, well, let me read it. I've got it right here. The question was raised a few months ago in a conversation with a friend. The question was, could a revolution be conducted in the modern world considering modern technology, extensive government troops, and battlefield weapons? At first thought, the task seemed so ominous, so daunting, and against such odds that it would be impractical, if not impossible. Upon reflecting on what must have been equally daunting to the Founding Fathers, it is not, as first anticipated, such an ominous task. The Founding Fathers faced British forces, the best trained and most successful military in the world. Its navy was master of the seas. Its land forces had recently defeated the French and had forced colonization around the world. It controlled the local government and had enacted laws that gave it nearly arbitrary control over the colonies. Well, their task was daunting too, but they took the initiative. They did not wait to be suppressed, or as I'm not sure that I agree with this concept of FEMA camps or not. I know back in the 90s I went to 5 of the alleged FEMA camps, and none of them were FEMA camps. There may be some now. I don't want to dispute that, but they're not going to go out and grab everybody that claims he's going to be a patriot. They're going to grab the A1s and the A2s, and the A3s they're not going to worry about if they have the initiative. Had they gotten Adams and Hancock in Lexington, it might have turned out differently. And they tried. They knew they were there, but they did not catch them. What would have happened though if some of the leaders, Sam Adams, John Hancock, say Patrick Henry, and a few others were taken out on the same day at the same time? Would we have had a revolution? George Washington, a number of other people. I can't think of the names offhand, but if those leaders had been taken out that early on in the game, would we have become the United States? I don't think so.
Well,
I really don't.
You know, our founding fathers and the people in the colonies at that time, I mean, they were fighters. They had to fight Indians. They had to fight wildlife. They had to hunt. And they had to clear a lot of land. They were workers. Today, we've been so dumbed down by the whole public fool system that and people don't even realize. I mean, they don't realize they've been enslaved here, economic slavery. I'm not a slave, man. I can go get my pickup truck and go get a beer. How are we going to motivate those kind of people to actually stand up and do something? And of course, you've got the examples set by Waco. I mean, after what happened after we formed the militias, the whole Oklahoma City was brought down to demonize the militias and try to blame it on the militias.
Well, it had its effect. Now, I corresponded with McVeigh the last couple months of his life, and I believe that he did it for the reasons that I put out in my articles. And I know a lot of people think it was a false flag operation. I have no reason to believe that. Did the government have knowledge? They may have had a little knowledge of it. They may have had a lot. But McVeigh acted out what I had heard. Now, remember, from 93 to 95, I was traveling around the country doing other stories and talking about Waco all over the country. What I heard frequently, especially in small groups after my talks on Waco, was, we need to do something. We ought to blow up a government building. I must have heard that many dozens of times. What was ironic is when it happened, with the very thing that they were saying should happen, did happen, a guy named Bo Greitz comes out and said that was a masterpiece. That was done by an expert. And that's not true. I mean, I took, when I was back in Florida, a friend of mine was in Special Forces. One of his MOSs was explosives, demolition.
Yeah.
And he said that, yeah, it takes a lot. You can't just make a bomb like that.